What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the Sixers Digest YouTube channel. My name is Sean Barnard, and there is a slew of Sixers news that was thrown at us between the Danny Green signing, David Duke signing, the assistant coaches, and of course the new James Harden news. So I'm here to break it all down for you guys. I do want to make sure I do my due diligence and pay the proper amount of time to each storyline. So I will be breaking them down pretty much individually. Today I want to dive into the recent James Harden reports. We got an awesome article by Ramona Shelburne of ESPN. You can check out the link in the bio of this video or the description of this video for that article there. I do encourage you guys to check that out to get the full picture, but I do want to dive into the most notable storylines from this today. It is kind of the most complete breakdown of the James Harden and Daryl Morey saga as we've seen it break down. Those, it's constantly changing, still a lot to develop within there, but I do want to make sure that I'm breaking down these most significant parts. This is kind of a deep dive into things and the most complete look at the picture in a way that we just haven't seen spelled out. So I do appreciate Ramona for breaking it down, and let's, without further ado, dive right into it. So the first storyline that has gotten traction from the story is James Harden basically declining the All-Star game. So I want to dive into the blurb about that here. And from Ramona Shelburne, she wrote, "The first hint that Harden's, quote, sacrifice wasn't being appreciated, much less rewarded in the way he hoped, came in late January when he wasn't voted to be an All-Star. Harden, who had made 10 consecutive All-Star games, was dismayed at the snub, sources said. It didn't help that his former Nets teammates Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving had both been voted as starters by the fans, media, and players, while Harden was a distant fourth among Eastern Conference guards behind Irving, Donovan Mitchell, and Jaylen Brown. Still, NBA Commissioner Adam Silver was prepared to name him as an injury replacement, sources said. Harden just had to give assurances that he would show up and play in the game. Days went by without Harden's answer. He was pouting. By the time Harden sent word that he would accept the invitation, Silver had moved on, naming Toronto Raptors Pascal Siakam as a replacement for an injured Durant. Now, to start with, James Harden deserved to be an All-Star this year. The biggest gripe that I had personally with it was that I thought he deserved it over Drew Holiday. If you look at the statistics, Harden averaged more points, rebounds, assists, shot better from the field, and shot better from three than Drew Holiday at that point in the season. We know that they're asked to do different things, that Drew Holiday is a little bit more of a connector versus the Bucks, versus James Harden was the co-star to Joel Embiid, which I guess he had issues even just being a co-star there. But the bottom line was I do think that James Harden did deserve to be an All-Star, and I do think it gets lost in the shuffle and in the frustrations of James Harden, that even all the complaints that you can have, and there are plenty, that he is still a highly effective player and a guy that does things in a way that very few across the league can. Now, that is why he also feels underappreciated in this. But at the same time, and regardless of all that context, it is a baby move to just be pouting and not even comment on the All-Star situation, to not send a message back to Adam Silver that you will or won't be there. If you want your vacation middle of the season, that's fine, but you can't be pouting that you didn't get the opportunity, because he did. And especially when you go back at this point in time in the season, that James Harden was making some statements on social media, retweeting tweets from his teammates or Instagram posts from his teammates talking about the snub. I know Niang sent one. I know Tyrese Maxey sent one. So James Harden was kind of having his cake and eating it too, which seems to be something that he loves to do by feeding into the hype that he got a snub while it was his own fault that he was not in the game. And let's dive into the next part here. Another cool little blurb was about the off-court culture and, all the other things that come with James Harden. Later in the article, Shelburne writes, quote, "But Harden didn't travel with the team to Miami," sources said. "He traveled separately, with permission from the front office, to enjoy the nightlife. This is not uncommon in the NBA or for Harden, but it didn't sit well with Rivers and several players on the team," sources said. Days later, Rivers brought it up in a team meeting, sources said, specifically mentioning several of the players who expressed concerns about Harden's action. The whole episode was, quote, "uncomfortable," one team source said. Even if they agreed with the substance of Rivers' message to Harden and the idea of holding him accountable, it was awkward for the players who were named. So we see that. I honestly have a lot of respect for Doc Rivers in this regard. Now, there's plenty, once again, that you can complain about Doc Rivers from a coaching standpoint. I will not defend the on-court tactical decisions, the game plan of seemingly give it to Joel Embiid and everybody else watch, the lack of playing young players. There's a lot that you can nitpick about his coaching style. But one thing that I do think Doc Rivers stands on his head for is he is the Mr. Accountability, that he is the guy that will go to bat, will hold guys accountable. And this is especially the case that he seems to do it privately while defending them publicly. And I honestly have even more respect for that. That circles back to the Ben Simmons situation. That it's even more impressive to me that behind the scenes, they were fighting, they were beefing, they were not seeing eye to eye, that they were Simmons was not responding well to Doc Rivers being on him, and that they were at each other's necks. And then every time that Doc Rivers stepped in front of the media, it was just, look at all the great things that Ben Simmons does. It's a little bit of a similar case with James Harden here in the way that he did deliver it. He did make the right statement. You can nitpick him naming players. I understand people having an issue with that, but the sentiment of what he brought up is true, that it is a selfish move of James Harden to put the team put himself before the team by prioritizing these off-court interactions and the nightlife. And the thing with James Harden, and this is the case pretty much with all athletes, is when you're winning, when you're playing well, nobody cares what you do. But when you're losing and when things aren't going well, the first thing it's going to bring up is these other things, whether it be, why are you streaming on Twitch all the time, or why are you going to the club late night, or all these things. That basketball should come first for these guys. That is their job. That is their profession. That is what they're being paid plenty of money to do. That has to be the priority. And it's frustrating when at times, and for Sixers fans specifically, I know feel this, when they feel they care more than individual guys on the team or the team as a whole, that's just not how things are built to work. So I do respect Doc Rivers trying to rein him in, trying to hold him accountable, because it was the right move, and there was plenty. Again, and another example of this was when James Harden went to Vegas in between the playoff series. I think that was absolutely another example of Doc Rivers publicly really defending James Harden, saying we didn't have a game, he cleared it, all that. I'm sure privately that there were conversations had. So I do respect that about Doc Rivers. It wasn't the right move by James Harden, and that I'm sure there was plenty of this. I've heard some whispers of a ton of partying situations that even in the playoffs, even things like that. So stuff like that definitely happened. The next thing that I wanted to touch on here was the specific opt-in to the contract. So as Shelburne wrote, rather than wait for Morey and the Sixers to present whatever offer had come up with once free agency opened July 1st, Harden and his representatives, Mike Silverman and Troy Payne, decided to pick up his $35.6 million player option before the June 30th deadline and ask for a trade. Better to take the guaranteed money for the 23-24 season than be forced to accept whatever offer the team made for him. The Sixers were stunned at Harden's decision, sources said, insisting to him and his representatives that they had only been distant because they were just hit with the largest tampering fine in NBA history and that they had every intention of re-signing him as soon as the rules allowed. But Harden was already too far gone. Quote, James takes things very personally, another source close to Harden said. Quote, when he feels like he's been wrong, he can be very stubborn. So with that quote there, the biggest takeaway, first off, is the Sixers being surprised of James Harden opting in. I do think that's notable. We know the lengthy and formerly strong relationship between Daryl Morey and James Harden, that there had to be some sort of communication. I guess what I get lost in a little bit of this is for two guys that have been together for a decade, in Daryl Morey and James Harden, obviously at different situations, and there was a little bit of a break in between, but the point still being that these guys should know each other. They should know how each other tick. They should have enough of a familiarity with how they're going to respond to things. And for the record, neither one of them are guys I would like to play hardball with. And now they're kind of at each other's necks with it. So James Harden is kind of have a Hall of Fame career as a bag fumbler when it comes to contracts. Now, some of this is, it happens naturally. He's forced his way out of Houston. He's forced his way out of Brooklyn. He had offers for max contracts for far more money than he ended up signing for at each of those locations. On one hand, I do respect the using that as leverage to get to the other locations that he wanted to be at. That is kind of how the system is built to use. We're seeing guys manipulate it now where they sign this lengthy contract and then force themselves out, a la Bradley Beal or Dame Lillard. That is not how the system is built to use. So Harden is to some extent using it the right way. But you can't be complaining about the back end. And he's, of course, fine with money. This is a guy who has plenty of off-court ventures and is still making $35.6 million a year next year, regardless of where he plays. In fact, if he does get his wish and gets traded, he's a trade kicker in his contract, so he'll be paid even more than that and go past that $40 million mark. So he's fine for money, is my point there. But it's very clear that his feelings were hurt. He felt like he was going to be blindsided by the Sixers. And when you look around, when you look at the market, there straight up wasn't one for James Harden. The Rockets rumors had died down. The Clippers are really the only team that there's any kind of legitimate buzz to, and that the reason that the opt-in made sense there is because they had no money to sign him in free agency. With the cap rules that they can make a trade for him, but they could not have outright signed him for anything more than a veteran's minimum, which Harden, of course, would sniff his nose up at this point. And the best point that I wanted to bring up from the Ramona Shelburne article here is this line here, which I think she kind of hit the nail on the head. And this was at near the beginning of the article. She writes, quote, back in the arena, Harden continues, quote, obviously I'm capable of scoring more, he says, making eye contact to emphasize the point. But I'm playing the right way, just doing whatever's necessary to win. That's what it's all about. The Sixers won the game because the Clippers had no answer for Embiid, who finished with 41 points in 33 minutes, and after the game credited Harden for, quote, making it easy for him. in terms of momentum and messaging from Philadelphia's two superstars, any two superstars really, this is as good as it gets. Both players talking about how much they appreciated each other. One, after a dominant performance, recognized the other's role in making it so. But the line between positive self-talk and talking yourself into something is a fine one. Absolute bars from Ramona there. That is the issue with James Harden, is for the entire season, it is him trying to talk himself into this selfless role of him making the sacrifice, when in reality, asking you to take more catch and shoot threes, to run more pick and roll, and to defer to the two-time reigning scoring champion are just not tall asks. That these are basic basketball decisions that the Sixers are asking him to do, and he's acting like it is being asked to move mountains and sacrifice so much. And the bottom line, and if this reality has not hit James Harden in the face yet, it absolutely should have from this offseason, is there is 0 teams in the NBA who are willing to hand the reins to James Harden, allow him to play his isocentric style of play for the length of the season. For what it's worth, James Harden still led the NBA in frequency and isolation attempts, over 30%. No one else in the NBA reached that clip. He still got his opportunities to take guys off the dribble. He still got his opportunities to have those moments to shine when he needed them. It was not this massive sacrifice. You can bring up the money. Sure, that is fair that he did take a $14 million, $15 million pay cut by opting out of the player option and doing the 1+1 deal. But you can also look at that the other way. There is no coincidence that he takes that money and that his friends come to Philadelphia, that PJ Tucker and Daniel House get that money. So, and that it was proven by the tampering fine, which was referenced by the Sixers stuff. So, like, there's two sides to every coin. There's two sides to every story. I would argue there's 3 sides to every story with this, because I think there is a Sixers side, a James Harden side, and a truth. And James Harden went as far as to point that out himself by taking to Instagram and posting, y'all got to chill with these reporters. I'm going to start reporting shit. So I would love to hear the James Harden point of view. I would love to hear him jump on this. And for what it's worth, I'm not saying James Harden is a bad player. Look at these stats: 21 points, 6.1 rebounds, 10.7 assists. There's very clearly a place in the NBA for him, but it's up to James Harden to decide what he wants for the rest of his career. There are things that he does that are problematic within a locker room. He is not the guy that can be the best player and the leader on the team. And that's not always an issue, that the best player is not always the leader. But when Joel Embiid probably isn't either, and James Harden definitely isn't, then there's an issue from a locker room standpoint, and that is a problem that we're seeing within the Sixers. Now, for James Harden specifically, he needs to figure out what the priority is for the rest of his career, because we've seen issues at every place. You can make a Hall of Fame all-time great team with just his teammates that he's played with in the past, and he's never been happy. And we've seen him at multiple different locations. So the decision comes when you see these superstars aging. Do they become content with it? Are they willing to accept a more minimal role and kind of ride off into the sunset, still play winning basketball, contribute on a winning team? Think of a Vince Carter is an awesome example of a guy who regressed from an NBA superstar to a role player. James Harden at his peak was obviously better than Vince Carter ever was, although Vince Carter was no slouch by any means. But I would say that James Harden takes the cake there. So it is a little bit a harder statement to take. Or there's the guys that it can't happen to. James Harden is a better player than Russell Westbrook, but I think it is a fair comparison to make that Westbrook's had a really difficult time figuring out how to be effective at a more minimal role, that he's a guy that's incredibly ball dominant, who needs to get downhill, all these things. For him to be beneficial and contributing to a team, and I would like to shout out Westbrook, because I think with the Clippers, he's kind of finding his footing with that. Who knows? Maybe Harden and him will be teammates again, and that's going to create a whole different mess. But this is kind of a blunt reality that superstars have to hit, that it is not meant to be forever. And I hate seeing James Harden trying to play the both sides of the coin here, of talking like he's still that guy while typing up the franchise. It just feels like he's talking himself into it, and it's not what he genuinely feels. He still thinks he's a superstar, and he's not. There's no place in the NBA for him to have the free reign that he wants. So for here, we will see what happens from there. I do appreciate you guys tuning in for this. As I mentioned, I do suggest you read the whole article. There's a ton of other awesome clips in there, but I did just want to hit on the major points. And also, I want to make sure that you guys are subscribing to the channel here. We got it up to 93.6% of you, the people watching this, are not subscribed, so a little bit down from 95. So I do appreciate you guys for that, but let's keep that climbing. Let's go even more. I want to get below the 90s there. So once again, thank you for watching this. I'll be back with a couple more videos on the channel for all the other Sixers news, so make sure to tune in. Keep your eyes posted for that. Ring that bell to make sure you're staying with the loop, and we'll talk next time here on Sixers Digest. Peace.